everybody. This is your 1 minute announcement. 1 minute. Check, check, check. This is a 1 minute announcement. I'm a little late, so 1 minute. All right, if everyone would head to their seats, we can get started. All right, welcome back, everybody. Please welcome our third presenter of the evening, Miss Annalise Eisenbarth, with her thesis, Trust Issues in a Bottle, Calling for FDA Third-Party Testing of Supplements. Let's give her a hand.
Between caring for her newborn and 6 other children, Sanette Morris had little time for herself. Like many mothers, she wanted to lose some of her baby weight. However, she was far too busy to follow an intensive weight loss plan. She needed something simple, something as easy as taking a pill. So in 2012, Sanette decided to take a dietary supplement called Oxy Elite Pro, hoping that it would offer her a harmless solution to simply feel like herself. A few weeks later, Sanette felt violently ill. Her family watched helplessly as she grew sicker and sicker until she had to be hospitalized. The doctors delivered the devastating news that her liver had gone into acute failure, and she had a week to live. Sanette soon passed away, leaving her 7 children motherless and heartbroken. In reality, the seemingly harmless supplement that she took was lethal. Oxy Elite Pro had been contaminated with a toxic dosage of Prozac, an FDA-approved drug for treating depression. The deadly supplement had already been on the market for 6 years before the FDA finally linked it with other cases of supplement-induced liver failure in 2013. However, the FDA's efforts were too late for the unsuspecting Sanette. Like Sanette, millions of Americans take dietary supplements. Whether they rely on them for specific concerns or to support overall health, around 77% of adults and 33% of children take supplements daily. Dietary supplements were first introduced to the United States in the 1930s and became increasingly popular, causing a massive growth in the industry during the 1980s. The Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act regulated supplements like pharmaceuticals, making them harder to both produce and access. Consumers pushed back, arguing that this regulation was too restrictive and called for congressional reform. So in 1994, Congress passed the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, or the DSHEA. With its passage, the DSHEA redefined a dietary supplement as a category of food intended to supplement the diet that contains a vitamin, mineral, amino acid, herb, or botanical. Because of its new classification, supplements are subject to their own unique regulations and no longer undergo pre-market testing or direct FDA approval like pharmaceuticals. Because of these looser regulations, supplements can more easily be developed from an idea into a product. A supplement company simply creates a formula with the help of scientific experts, then manufactures and tests the supplement before selling it. Additionally, the DSHEA shifted the regulatory burden for supplements from the FDA to manufacturers, who are now solely responsible for ensuring that supplements are safely produced. This means that manufacturers can sell any supplement they deem to be safe. Since the FDA has no direct authority over supplements before they are sold, the DSHEA created regulatory guidelines known as the Good Manufacturing Practicing Standards, or GMPs. GMPs ensure that manufacturers monitor, control, and maintain the quality and safety of their products throughout the manufacturing process. However, these regulations are often ignored. In 2018, the FDA inspected 591 supplement facilities and found that 54% violated GMP standards, with many lacking any standards for testing their products for purity and composition. Despite these concerningly loose regulations, consumers still prefer supplements to pharmaceuticals. According to the Department of Health and Human Services, 23 million Americans reported taking supplements over pharmaceuticals, and 30 million prefer them to over-the-counter drugs. Just last year, Americans spent $78 billion on dietary supplements, and trends suggest that we will eventually create a market worth $185 billion by 2036. Thousands of dangerous supplements flood our market, and in a continual game of whack-a-mole, the FDA struggles to remove them. Consumers are needlessly suffering from hazardous supplements, resulting in around 2,000 hospitalizations and 23,000 emergency room visits each year. Third-party testing offers a solution by independently verifying that supplements are contaminant-free, match their label, and are safely produced. Corporations such as Costco, Walmart, and Amazon have seen the importance of testing and now require supplements at their stores to undergo strict third-party testing, ensuring that their customers will always purchase safe supplements. Since 1994, the $4 billion supplement market of 4,000 products has grown to an $85 billion market, with anywhere from 80,000 to 100,000 products. The industry has grown too large to be supported by a faulty system that cannot assure the safety of supplements to consumers. Congress should amend the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994 to require mandatory third-party testing of dietary supplements before they are sold, for three main reasons. First, the prevalence of contaminated supplements on the markets presents a health risk to consumers. Secondly, the FDA's current regulations are insufficient to remove dangerous supplements from the market. And finally, Australia and the corporation Amazon have implemented third-party testing, proving that this type of testing is both effective and plausible. First, Congress should require supplements to undergo pre-market testing because of the amount of dangerous supplements sold. Most people assume that supplements are safe and that the FDA strictly regulates them. According to the 2024 Healthy Habits Survey, 47% of Americans surveyed believe that the FDA approves supplements, and 39% said they are confident that their supplements are safe because of this approval. However, this trust is misplaced, and the American public needs to be aware of the dangers posed by supplements. Contaminated supplements can cause severe adverse effects, such as liver failure, cardiovascular issues, kidney damage, cancer, neurological diseases, and even death. In 2019, Pew Research discovered that 1 in 8 American adults have experienced an extreme side effect due to a dietary supplement, or have an immediate family member who's experienced similar effects. Due to the underreporting of these adverse events, researchers cannot estimate the amount of contaminated supplements sold on the market. However, smaller case studies can provide a glimpse at the larger problem at hand. As I mentioned earlier, the DSHEA created regulatory guidelines, known as GMP standards. Unfortunately, manufacturers ignore these standards and continue to produce and sell hazardous supplements. It is no surprise, then, that supplements frequently contain heavy metals, pesticides, and mold. In just 1 month, the FDA seized hundreds of thousands of supplements from a company's warehouse that contained an excessive amount of lead, which poisoned many consumers. Additionally, the Government Accountability Office tested 40 different herbal supplements and found that 37 contained lead, with many also containing mercury, cadmium, arsenic, and pesticides. Even in low doses, contaminated supplements cause heavy metals to compromise kidney, heart, brain, and bone health. Mycotoxins, which are cancer-causing fungal toxins, were also found in 96% of herbal supplements they tested. Additionally, when a manufacturer tampers with a supplement's potency, they also put consumers' health at risk. In 2008, a factory employee made a measuring error, causing a batch of liquid supplements to contain an excess of selenium. When Professor Jones of Vanderbilt University investigated the findings, he found that consumers had ingested 764 times the recommended dose. Consumers continued to suffer from organ damage months after the product reached shelves, which could have been avoided if the company had implemented third-party testing. Unfortunately, supplements also contain even more lethal substances, such as hidden pharmaceuticals. Between 2007 and 2021, 1,068 unique weight loss and sports supplements were found to contain hidden drugs. Additionally, a 2021 FDA study found that all 26 weight loss and sports supplements they purchased from Amazon contained hidden pharmaceuticals. However, pharmaceutical contamination is not always accidental. Some manufacturers intentionally contaminate their products to increase profit. In 2022, a supplement company sold supplements that contained hidden drugs. When tried, the CEO admitted to lying to consumers about the content and safety of the products, as well as working with other manufacturers to sell supplements that also contained illegal drugs. If the FDA had required third-party testing, these drugs would have been identified and not allowed to be sold in supplements. Without requiring pre-market testing, manufacturers will continue to ignore GMP standards and produce dangerous supplements. Third-party testing would address this issue by requiring manufacturers to test their supplements with a third-party lab before sale. Continuing on to my second point, third-party testing offers the FDA a solution to its ineffective methods of removing dangerous supplements from the market. The FDA's relationship with dietary supplements is primarily post-market. They can intervene when supplements are adulterated, misbranded, contain a new dietary ingredient, or when adverse events are reported. In other words, until someone is hurt, the FDA cannot remove a supplement from the market. To learn about dangerous supplements, the FDA relies on voluntary reports from manufacturers, medical professionals, and affected consumers through the Adverse Events Reporting System. However, since their system depends on voluntary reports, the FDA struggles to collect accurate data. In 2007, the Government Accountability Office found that the FDA received 1% of all adverse events reports, compared to those received by poison control centers. Additionally, in 2020, the FDA received only 3,000 of the 50,000 total reports. Based on this data, the FDA receives 2% of all supplement-related adverse events reports each year. Because of this, consumers are blind to the hidden risks of their supplements and continue to purchase them despite their potentially lethal consequences. Instead of leaving consumers in the dark, third-party testing verifies that supplements are safe before they are sold. However, until these reforms are implemented, the FDA must go through a series of time-consuming steps to remove a dangerous supplement from the market. First, the FDA issues a warning letter, notifying the manufacturer that their product is unsafe. Next, they ask the manufacturer to voluntarily stop the supplement's production and sale. However, the dangerous supplement still remains available until the manufacturer agrees to the recall. Only after this can the FDA notify the public of the supplement's recall. Unfortunately, voluntary recalls have little power to stop manufacturers from selling hazardous supplements, as they can simply rebrand them and place them back on the market. To strengthen the FDA's authority, Congress passed the Food Safety Modernization Act in 2011. This allowed the FDA to issue mandatory recalls or to seize supplements when manufacturers refuse to comply. However, this act has only complicated things. Before initiating a mandatory recall or seizure of a product, the FDA must prove that a supplement poses a serious adverse health consequence or death. This legal bar requires extensive research, resources, and time, things that the FDA frankly lacks. Because of this, the FDA has issued only 2 mandatory recalls since 2011. Despite their best efforts, the FDA lacks the resources to stop manufacturers from selling lethal supplements. In 2022, Professor Cohen of Harvard Medical School looked at 31 supplements that had been recalled for containing a drug. The study revealed that of these 31 supplements, only 1 product was recalled by its manufacturer. And 1/3 of these products continued to be sold 6 years after the FDA sent the initial warning letter. In another study of 27 supplements recalled between 2009 and 2012, Cohen found that 2/3 were sold in 2013, and that 66% of these products still contained hidden pharmaceuticals. As long as these current regulations stand, the FDA will never be able to estimate the amount of dangerous supplements on the market or stop manufacturers from selling them. Only third-party testing will protect consumers, as it prevents any harmful supplements from reaching the market. And finally, the FDA should require supplements to undergo third-party testing because Australia and Amazon have implemented it, proving that this type of testing is both effective and possible. The problem of supplement contamination is not unique to the US. Australia's FDA equivalent, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, or the TGA, is similarly unable to prevent harmful supplements from reaching its market. Specifically, it struggles to protect its athletes from adulterated supplements. For the past several years, supplements have made up a large percentage of anti-doping rule violations, or ADRVs. Between 2016 and 2019, supplements were responsible for 1/3 of positive doping tests in Australia. Hoping to reduce cases of accidental supplement doping, the TGA established the National Anti-Doping Agency, called Sports Integrity, in 2020. Sports Integrity hired several independent testing companies to analyze supplements for banned contaminants. Using this data, the agency created a mobile app that published the ingredients and safety levels of supplements. This app has helped athletes avoid contaminated supplements, and for the first time in over a decade, 0 athletes tested positive for a supplement-related ADRV in 2021, 2022, and 2023. By implementing third-party testing, the Australian government has effectively reduced cases of accidental supplement doping amongst its athletes, demonstrating the effectiveness of third-party testing. On a corporate scale, Amazon has revised its supplement policy to require third-party testing. In 2023, Amazon received multiple warning letters from the FDA about contaminated supplements sold on its website. Instead of simply removing the dangerous products, Amazon chose to implement a new and proactive supplement policy. As of 2026, they require all supplements sold on their website to be tested by an approved third-party facility. Supplement sellers and manufacturers must test their products with one of Amazon's 3 approved third-party companies and allow these companies to report GMP and Certificate of Analysis document results directly to Amazon. Since Amazon's supplement policy is relatively new, its effectiveness has yet to be fully demonstrated. However, its successful implementation of third-party testing should prove that this type of testing is feasible on the federal scale. Both Australia and Amazon's supplement policies should demonstrate to the United States that third-party testing is an effective method to reduce supplement contamination. To address the elephant in the room, yes, requiring supplement testing will raise prices. Under this new policy, manufacturers will pay around $1,500 to $2,500 per supplement for an independent lab to test for contaminants and potency. Because of this, supplements will be more expensive. However, people are willing to pay more for tested supplements. A 2024 study by NSF International found that consumers will pay 11% more for third-party tested supplements, and that 89% prefer to purchase certified products. Despite its initial cost, manufacturers will see a net benefit by testing their supplements, as they can avoid the expenses of recalls and lawsuits. Third-party testing will raise the bar for supplement companies, and over time, practically eliminate the presence of dangerous supplements from our markets. Others may argue that the real issue is with the enforcement of our current regulations. Since the DSHEA's regulations are primarily post-market, manufacturers can sell dangerous supplements without immediate consequences. Ideally, GMP standards would protect against this. However, the FDA lacks the resources and time to ensure that manufacturers adhere to these standards. Additionally, since GMP standards require manufacturers to test their own products, bias and corruption can easily influence the reported safety of their products. Even if the FDA tried to better enforce these regulations, it could never guarantee the level of safety that third-party testing offers. The supplement market is simply too large for the DSHEA's regulations to be effective, and it will continue to grow out of the already overtaxed FDA's hands. In conclusion, Congress should amend the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act to require mandatory third-party testing of dietary supplements before they are sold, for three main reasons. First, the prevalence of contaminated supplements on the markets presents a health risk to consumers. Secondly, third-party testing offers the FDA a solution to its ineffective methods of removing dangerous supplements from the market. And finally, Australia and Amazon have implemented third-party testing, proving that this type of testing is both effective and possible. The company that destroyed Sinet's life represents the worst type of supplement manufacturer, whose lethal products would never have reached consumers if they had been tested. In a long and drawn-out process, the FDA fought to recall the contaminated supplement that killed Sinet. However, it took 7 years to remove the supplement from the market, and 8 more years before the company was held to account. But no fine or prison sentence can restore life to Sinet and the many other defenseless victims of unregulated supplement companies. At this very moment, our markets are filled with lethal supplements. We should not have to protect ourselves against supplements or question if they are even safe. The FDA should give us full assurance of their safety. Congress has the power to amend the DSHEA and require third-party testing. But until it does, many more lives will be at risk and subject to the hazardous supplement industry. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, returning for Annalise's panel, we have Mr. Andy Crone, who was once the chair of our board and is now a board member. He also taught science here in numerous capacities for a long time and was our science department head. We also have Mrs. Angie Thompson, who is our current SR head, Mr. Luke Mars, who is our current SL head, and Neela Beto, who is our fine arts director and directs a lot of our plays with the Citizens Theater Company. Okay, you guys know the drill? Whenever you're ready.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that information with us. I wanted to address your third point. The two solutions, one seemed like a government solution, one was a private sector solution to the problems of the Amazon case. I'm a little confused why Amazon received the warning letters from the FDA. Is this a letter that goes to manufacturers or distributors? Because Amazon's really just a distributor.
Yeah, so Amazon was selling supplements that contained pharmaceuticals. So the FDA sent the warning letter directly to Amazon because they are a platform that supplement companies will sell their products on. Normally, warning letters are only received by the manufacturer, but this was a special case because of Amazon's platform.
So why didn't Amazon just say, not my problem, go talk to the manufacturer?
Yeah, so I think that Amazon felt like they had a sense of responsibility in the case because they were allowing those supplements to be distributed to their customers, and they ultimately wanted to provide their customers with full assurance that their supplements were safe.
So that seems very kind-hearted of Amazon. Do you feel like there might have been a monetary sort of like incentive for Amazon to actually respond?
Yeah, I think it's probably a multi-factor part. Number one, protecting their customers, but probably also the monetary incentive, because if Amazon was sending them warning letters, that meant eventually down the line, those products would have been taken off of the Amazon website. So that ultimately would have resulted as a loss of profit for Amazon. But as we can see, they chose to implement third-party testing, which means that they are now getting more sales than ever because they are ensuring ultimately safe products for their consumers.
So they came up with a solution that drove more business to them.
Mm-hmm.
They were able to elevate the prices of the products because people are willing to pay more for safe products. Sounds like the problem's solved. Don't you think all these other companies in the United States are going to say, wow, they've come up with a really good competitive solution. Let's just follow Amazon and competition will clean up the market. Is that not a solution to the problem in itself?
I don't think it is. Ultimately, because Amazon is just one company. And not everyone buys their supplements from Amazon. And ultimately, that is only protecting the percentage of Americans who choose to purchase their supplements from Amazon. There are going to be supplement consumers that aren't aware that these products could be contaminated or unsafe. So they are purchasing their products from companies that don't offer third-party testing. So ultimately, by requiring a federal standard for supplement testing, we are ultimately protecting all consumers, no matter if they are informed and making their choices by purchasing supplements for Amazon, or if they are uninformed and not aware of the really dark reality at hand.
Mrs. Beto was fastest on the draw.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question kind of on the Amazon thread here. You said that there are 3 approved third-party companies that Amazon is using. Who chose those companies? Who determined who those companies would be? Why those companies?
Yeah. So ultimately, Amazon was the higher-up that decided to partner with those companies. Those 3 are Eurofriends, UL Solutions, and NSF International. And ultimately, right now, those 3 third-party companies are the largest third-party corporations right now in the States. And they are already accredited, and they are known for their providing safe testing for these supplements. So ultimately, it was kind of a smart move on Amazon's choice to partner with those companies, if that answers your question.
So another follow-up, kind of going off of what Mr. Crone said. So why not address this in a little bit of a different way? I'm remembering when I was younger, and it actually may have been even before my time, where it was just kind of marketing of cigarettes, and there was the label, and the government required a label. Why not address this by adding labels that state that there were third-party testing, and kind of marketing in the same way from even kind of government entities saying, hey, go this direction with the label and stay away from these others? Why not head that direction?
Yeah, ultimately, I think that the true reason for requiring mandatory third-party testing is that we are protecting all consumers. And I also think that requiring it with a federal bar ensures that we are producing supplements that are 100% safe. Because ultimately, if we place this in the hands of private corporations that are just trying to make a monopoly and certify these supplements themselves, there's never a really true way to know if those companies are really holding these supplements to a high standard. To know, does my supplement really only contain vitamin C? Does it really only contain at the potency that's labeled on the back of the bottle? I think by requiring the government to have some oversight on this, it ultimately provides the strongest level of security instead of placing it yet again into the hands of businesses, which we've kind of seen the effect of it with the current state of our supplement market.
Wonderful job, Ms. Eisenbarth.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if we can name some names.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm going to go home and, I think I'm going to load up on some Jocko creatine shake tonight with the boys.
Mm-hmm.
And should I be worried?
You should.
So when I go to... No, you guys should be worried.
Jocko creatine?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Is that a thing?
It's good. It's totally a thing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Shows I'm a nerd, I guess.
Okay. I go to HEB.
Mm-hmm.
How worried should I be? I'm going down that health food aisle. Am I surrounded by dangerous stuff? What's going on here?
On the majority, yes. So because the FDA doesn't require supplements to be approved before sale, there's no way of really knowing if your supplement contains what's supposed to contain. You're placing really your health and your children's health in the hands of these manufacturers. But right now, there are supplement companies that do third-party test. So I'd recommend when you get home, look at your little creatine bottle. If it has a label on it that says like NSF certified or UL Solution certified, it's safe, you're good. But the point is that some people don't know that supplements could contain pharmaceuticals or heavy metals or things that are really detrimental to their life. So ultimately, we need to protect the unaware consumer.
I'm pretty sure Jocko wouldn't harm me like that. I think he'd do right by me. But also, I don't want Jocko to come after me. I'm wondering, how does this fix things going forward, though? I mean, we pre-market test, and then how do I keep Jocko accountable after that? What else comes along with this testing? I mean, is there surprise visits to the manufacturing facility, things like that? Could you go into some of those details?
Yes. So in essence, what I'm proposing is, so the FDA would partner with a select amount of third-party facilities, and those facilities would have a government contract. So they would be fully approved by the FDA, and they would be testing supplements to a government standard. Ideally, this would be to check both the identity, so the supplement is what it's supposed to be, and the composition. It contains what it's supposed to be at the level at which it's supposed to contain. And these companies would be required to batch test their supplements against these FDA standards. And this would be every batch, they would need to test it, so we ensure that they are safe. And then hopefully, now that there would be a lower amount of contaminated supplements on the market, the FDA could use their now slightly freed up time to inspect these third-party facilities, ensure that they are adhering to the government guidelines that they stated, and that they're ultimately following the procedures to the level of quality that the FDA was asking them to.
So this is kind of a follow-up. As you're addressing this with kind of these bigger businesses, with what happened with Amazon in 2026, and I know that's so soon, were there any studies that showed the effect that this maybe had on the smaller businesses that were trying to sell their things through Amazon? Did they just start dropping off of there, and we lose that small business doing a great thing?
Yes, so in my research, there wasn't a ton of numbers available. However, I did go on some Reddit pages that small supplement manufacturers had posted it, and they were kind of complaining about the cost. But overall, there will obviously be an impact on smaller supplement businesses because they will feel impacted by this. But I think there are several avenues that the FDA could take to ultimately protect these smaller businesses. For example, the way that the manufacturing process would work is if these larger third-party companies were prime contractors, they would ultimately try to win the bid to become the FDA-approved facility, and that would incentivize them to lower the cost of their testing to be able to be contracted with the FDA, because that means they'll have more purchasers, buyers, and that will ultimately lower the cost of testing, which hopefully should allow smaller businesses to come in and allow their supplements to be tested at the lower level. There's also a thought that the FDA could potentially subsidize smaller companies to enable them to have a cheaper cost of testing for the first year and a half of this policy rollout. So hopefully that should minimize the impact of cost on small businesses.
What are the current penalties for these manufacturers poisoning people like Sinet, and why aren't they sufficient to dissuade manufacturers from being more careful with their products?
Yeah, so right now the main penalties are lawsuits against the companies, and then also seizing contaminated supplements and recalling them. And ultimately, the reason why it hasn't held manufacturers to continue to brew safe supplements is that the FDA lacks really the resources to implement these penalties against the companies. So they're kind of being let slip where they can kind of crawl underneath the cracks and not ultimately face the impacts of this testing. And ultimately, I don't think we're at a point where we could give the FDA more money where they could better enforce these regulations, and still, all that is still post-market. So it still doesn't deal with the pre-market capacity of ensuring that there are only safe supplements on the market. If that answers your question.
Well, in a certain sense, it feels like, the cigarette market, you've got companies who are putting defective products into the market that are killing people, and it feels like there might be sort of a solution that essentially is legislative that says, you put bad stuff in the market and, you spend some time in jail or, whatever. But, I mean, is there sort of a back end sort of like penalty that would incentivize people instead of going at it from sort of the front end that you're...
I don't think that there would ever be an effective enough measure to ultimately dissuade the companies from continuing to sell their dangerous products. And even then, we still put consumers at risk because they ultimately trusted that that product was safe, and it wasn't, and they were hurt by it. So ultimately, I think it's really emphasizing the value of human life here, of where we really want to protect them at all costs, instead of figuring out, how can we allocate more money to just hit harder on the post-market capacity.
I think you stated that there were something like hundreds of thousands of supplements in the supplement world. So who determines what is a supplement, what isn't a supplement? How realistic and feasible is it to have third-party testing on all of these thousands of supplements? How long would that take? Just kind of talk me through the process of how you would approach this if this is actually something that was now happening.
Yeah, so ultimately it's on the manufacturers to work with the scientists within their company to ultimately ensure that their supplement follows the FDA definition of a dietary supplement. And you're right, this market is very large. There's a lot of products right now on the market that are contaminated and are potentially lethal. So what I'm proposing, it would probably take about a year to roll out. And I'm like, in a perfect world, I would just say, take all of the bad supplements on the market and we can just start testing them all now. But ultimately, that's not feasible. So what I would propose is that the FDA would send out a nationwide warning to all supplement consumers, saying that, no, the supplements, they're on the market, we can't guarantee that they are safe and that they contain what they're supposed to contain. So that would ultimately be on the consumer to ensure that they're only purchasing third-party tested supplements from these smaller companies before the federally run third-party program gets pushed out in about a year. So then once that would happen, then we would require all new supplements that are trying to be sold on the market to undergo third-party testing. So it's a bit of a complicated process. And again, this is pretty theoretical. But I do think that it will take a while, but ultimately the benefit is worth the arduous process.
So with that, with how long it might take, do you think, should we break down the supplements into categories so that we could focus then on those that might need it most instead of trying to tackle all of them at once?
I think that definitely could be a proposed solution. I think if there could be a conceptual idea for the first year, no. Ultimately, sorry, my brain's just all over the place. Ultimately, all supplements need to be tested at the same level, because even supplements that are like a multivitamin that contain more products, they can still be just as contaminated as a safer supplement that's like a vitamin C that only contains one ingredient. So ultimately, I think that we need to hold them at the start of this program all to the same level, so there's not exceptions that would potentially end in a consumer being hurt.
Is there, tell me more about the market. How many of these supplements are coming from manufacturers overseas?
I don't have a specific statistic for you, but I do know that the majority of the supplements on the market are U.S. made. But there is a good portion of them that are coming from overseas. Yeah.
Can I follow up? Do we know whether the ones that are in the U.S. are the ones that are causing the most harm, or are the ones coming from overseas causing the most harm? And if they're coming from, if ones overseas are coming from the most harm, why not focus those first, or place a tariff on them or something like that?
Yeah. I don't have a number of kind of cause of death or even problems associated with American-made and international supplements. However, right now, overseas supplements are held to the exact same standard under the current DSHE's legislation as U.S. supplements. So they're all required to meet GMP standards. And even the FDA, in theory, can go inspect international facilities. I doubt that that's happening. So really, they're being held to the same standard, so I wouldn't expect international companies to be safer or more dangerous than the U.S. products.
Just to follow up on that, so would this regulation require overseas manufacturers to be held to the same third-party testing? And what if they chose not to, and they wanted to sell not through Amazon but through Walmart, and Walmart was willing to sell their products? What's to stop somebody from buying it, I guess? I mean, what is the mechanism that keeps Walmart from selling an untested product?
Yeah. So ultimately, this new policy would require overseas sellers to adhere with the new third-party standards. So they would need to test with an FDA-approved third-party facility. And ultimately, I think that the way that we would hold them accountable to not sell untested supplements or through, on American platforms is ultimately to kind of beef up our post-market regulation systems, like I was talking to you about recalls and warning letters. The FDA would need to make those standards and procedures better to be able to kind of protect that side.
A little bit of follow-up on that. So specifically, you mentioned Amazon, but I think about like social media, and people buy things based on what influencers are influencing, and those aren't necessarily going to be third-party approved products, and those can be purchased from places like TikTok and all over the place. You can just click on a button, and then you will be purchasing something from some unverified site, probably, foreign product that is not FDA approved. So how does this tackle that issue?
Yeah. So in that case, these private sellers would be intentionally ignoring the FDA standard to third-party test those products. And ultimately, I think that would be on the consumer's responsibility to know, okay, I am purchasing a supplement that is not FDA approved. There is not the seal on the supplement bottle that says that this has been approved. So that is on my responsibility to know that I may be taking a potentially unsafe supplement. So yeah, I think that's unfortunately going to be put on the consumer to just know where they are purchasing their supplements from, and knowing the kind of the consequences that would come with that.
And that's our time. Let's give her a hand. All right, in 17 minutes, we'll be back here for our final presenter of the season.
Thank you. Good questions. Yay, Angelina.